Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to PWD Allies podcast. The show is being broadcasted from Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. Beautiful BC, Victoria. And if you've never been to Victoria, check it out sometime on your travels. Please, tune into your favorite podcast where you find it best suited for you. There's lots of variety to choose from. Today, I have a very special guest, MP Bonita Zarrillo from Port Moody, Coquitlam. I got it right this time, Bonita. I pronounced it. As you say, Port Moody, and Coquitlam, but I got it right. So thank you very much for tuning in today, and thanks for coming on as my guest.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation again. It's good to be back. I'm here on the unceded and traditional territory of the Coquitlam and the shared territories of the Coast Salish, and I'll hope to take you up on your offer to come over to Victoria at some point.
And just before we get going, Brent, we wanted to say as well that it's a pre-recorded episode, so we're going to be releasing this episode later at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, and so the chat at that time will be live, but this is not a live episode. This is pre-recorded.
Yeah, you can tune into the live chat later today, and you won't be interacting with our guest today, but you'll be interacting with each other, and commenting on what you.
It's like a watch party.
Yeah, it's actually quite neat, actually, how it's broadcast that way. Yeah, so Bonita, I guess we'll get started on the big topic of the CDB. Where does the CDB stand right now for Canadians with disabilities across Canada? I know that a lot of discussions have been happening on Twitter sphere, the social media on Twitter, as people would know it now. It's called X. I still call it Twitter because that's what I know it as. And, a lot of people were in the disability community are seeing it as maximum $200 per month when it does come to fruition. It's just, I guess a lot of the people were really upset from what I'm seeing, all the comments out there, and they're wondering why it was only $200 up to. I should say the keyword up to $200, and then there's the DTC as a stumbling block to make them qualify for that.
Yes. Well, they absolutely are within their right for sure to be angry about this and to be really disappointed. There was so much trust that was extended to the Liberal government on this. There was so much momentum behind them. The disability community really opened their hearts and shared so much consultation, and the Liberal government decided that this is the way they were going to move forward with as you said, the smallest amount really they could, which was the $200 up to, you stated it, Brent, maximum $200 a month, and hidden behind this DTC, which everyone told them shouldn't be. So there's a lot of work to do to move ahead. It is in law, it is required, the government is required to be paying this out. So this is definitely a move forward, but there's still so much work to do, and so much recovery that this Liberal government needs to do to bring trust back. I mean, they said now they want to reopen a whole new consultation process. Totally unacceptable.
Yeah. Well, especially when it first started out, when the announcement came out back in, years ago now, like back in 2020. And, the announcement that we'd watch it in the news every morning, the Justin Trudeau would come on your morning news hour and all these announcements. But then Canadians with Disabilities was the last segment of population to get an announcement. And always just dragging the heels and delays, and then they call it a snap election. And then, of course, then the bill got, defeated, just kind of washed right out and then redone again. It's kind of like regurgitated, I called it, and thrown back out there with the same concept. But it was supposed to be over 1 million people. And then it went down to 600,000 and now down to maybe 25,000 at the most. And it's like a gut punch, to the disability community. And I guess, too, is a lot of the chatter was saying that, and nothing toward you at all, Bonita, but it was saying that the NDP had voted for the $200, up to $200. I was wondering if you could maybe explain this to the disability community on that, what happened, or like what's going on with that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that it was a real disappointment. It really was, like you said, a gut punch when that news came out that was the amount of the benefit. And for sure, it's inconsistent with all of the Canadian commitments, whether they're international commitments on rights to adequate standard of living, whether it's even our constitutional rights to equal access to public services, which we know income support is an essential public service, that they have they have a right to an adequate. So I know that the fact that the amount is so low is so disappointing, and for sure it's not something that the NDP supports in any way. The problem is the government rolls it in like they do with many programs that they don't want to call out. They roll it in with this budget bill, and we know right now that there were many other things in that budget bill, specifically housing, that was very important. The largest investment in co-op housing in decades was in that bill, and the opportunity. And then obviously the pharmacare and the dental care was also in that bill. So it became a very difficult position, but at the end of the day, we're moving forward with all kinds of services that Canadians need, and we are not giving up this fight. We have the budget bill coming up again. As NDPers, we are saying this $200 is totally not acceptable. We want to see it much higher, at least 4 times higher. We want to see it, and this disability tax credit needs to be removed. I know that the government's trying to say that it's the only equal level measure across all of Canada. This just isn't true. Yeah. It's a medical decision whether someone gets a disability tax credit or not. And we know that I know 2 sisters both have MS. One got the tax credit from their medical professional, one did not. Their argument that it's equal is just, it's not. It doesn't hold water.
Well, we can talk about, because last time you were here, we wanted to talk about the dental, actually, the NDP's dental plan. And I just heard the other day that the DTC was going to be a prerequisite for that too. But we can talk about that later if you want. I just wanted as well though to talk about. I mean, I think the last time you were on, and I meant this as a total compliment to him. I said that both you and Mike Morris were the 2-headed monsters. In the sense that you're the only 2 that consistently stand up and fight for the Canada Disability Benefit, like more than anybody else. It's you and Mike Morris that are taking all the slings and arrows, and whenever you put yourself out there as a PWD advocate, like both Brent and I can speak to that. I'm not on Twitter anymore, but Brent is, and he probably takes a little bit more slings and arrows than I do. But we know that we can see that both you and Mike Morris are taking a fair bit of slings and arrows, like I said. And I just didn't know if you wanted to speak on that. Like when the NDP, for example, okayed the $200, was it because part of the reason was because you were worried about a triggered election, or was that part of the decision, or what?
So thanks for bringing that back around, Neil. I'll start by saying that it's good to have more than, to have multiple voices in the House of Commons, and I'm surprised how little we hear from the Conservatives. The official opposition, should have stood up on this, and we did not hear from the official opposition. And let's talk about the Bloc too. I mean, the Bloc as well. They have their own universal basic income program that's running right now. So, maybe it wasn't as relevant or as important to Quebecers, but certainly Canada-wide, where's the opposition? Where is the Conservatives on this? Really disappointing. And I would say that just in regards to the budget, right, is that the Conservatives not only walked away from this, they walked away from starting the journey for persons with disabilities. They walked away from the housing investments. They walked away from the dental and the pharmacare. I'm sure many of you hear from folks that are desperately in need of expansion on that pharmacare. Yeah. So that's, that on the larger picture, we need to fix the social safety net that's been eroded decade after decade after decade. And Neil will go back to the dental, but I just want to talk a little bit about housing. Look where we are on the housing front after 40 years of no social.
It's terrible. Yeah. Terrible. Mm-hmm. It's a state of emergency, and I know that a lot of critics will call it a crisis. I call it a state of emergency because it shouldn't be in this. We should not be in a housing emergency or crisis or anything. I mean, that housing should be built for people to have for homes. Like, people are living in tents. I mean, because they can't afford the high market rent.
Our last podcast was about housing, and I hope people share that out because it was a really good it was a super extended episode, but it was I would really like that episode that we did, the last one.
Absolutely. And, absolute state of emergency. I had a mother in my office last week, second time she's come to see me about her son, adult son, who works full time with a developmental disability that's displaced due to demoviction, and they were paying $800. They found a basement suite, but they're paying $1,600 now for that basement suite. They don't read or write, which they told the landlord that, but the landlord said, that's fine, just sign here, here, and here. Now the person is on the hook for all of the utilities for the entire house. So I'm working now to try to help navigate through that. But I mean, just the disadvantage of persons with disabilities already, and then just the absolute abuse of corporate landlords to take advantage of the market right now, and to demo-evict people knowing they have nowhere to go, and then taking advantage of them by upping their rent, doubling their rents. It's despicable. So very sad.
Even my landlord, basically admits that rents will go as sky high as whatever the market will bear. And I was shocked to hear that. But at the same time, I don't want to call him out because I don't want to lose my place, right? So I was livid when I heard that too, because people's incomes don't go sky high. Sky is the limit. I mean, people only have so much to budget in per month for rent. And when comes a point where how high is rent going to go where people can't afford to live? I mean, in the place that they want to be in.
That's right. And sorry, go ahead, Neil.
I was going to ask for your opinion on, like, I'm sure you're following David Eby's BC Builds, and there was an article in the newspaper a couple of days ago, and that's why we did the podcast, because one of the examples that was given was there was some money paid out to or it was a loan by the BC government to do this, affordable housing in kits, and the affordable housing for a 2-bedroom, like if you were like a married couple with a kid or two, you would need to have a 2-bedroom. And so the 2-bedroom example that there was 700 square feet, and according to BC Housing's own numbers, you would need to have a take-home pay of $193,000 in order to afford this 2-bedroom place. Now, I don't know how many average families can afford $193,000 when we threw out some numbers, and the average income for most family incomes is around I think it's $108,000 $1,000 before taxes. So I just wanted to get your feedback if you've been following that. I think it's just kind of crazy, the math that goes into all that.
I certainly have been following it, and you point out exactly why tying things to the market is not the way to go, to tie affordable housing to the market. So I'm just going to talk about my colleague MP Jenny Kwan out in Vancouver East. She identified this very, very early, that this idea of affordable being 80% of market still wasn't affordable. So that's another thing that the NDP worked on federally, was a new definition of what's affordable, because that 80% mark it's not like 80% of $2,700 is still not affordable. So definitely that definition needs to be redefined. We're leading in that work in the NDP. But you mentioned something else I just wanted to touch on, and that was, married couples or common law couples, and how I want to talk a little bit about how disability payments and even the Canada Disability Benefit will be potentially at risk if people decide that they'd like to marry or cohabitate together. And I'm interested in what you hear from residents about this, because certainly NDP, we don't want any clawbacks. We don't think people should be punished to have a lifelong partner or to share in household costs. So I'm interested in your thoughts on that, because I think there's room for us to do more work there.
Yeah, I can comment on that. Recently, I decided to phone up BC Housing because I was curious to find out about their housing lists. And I was told that there's at least 20-year waiting list right now. Like, there's such a demand for housing, but they're going to take families with children first. And I understand that. I mean, they want to get families, with their children in. I said, okay, but what about if people that are, say 2 PWD that live in market housing and they want to have cheaper housing? Okay, he says, well, I'm not sure what you're asking. I said, well, to get into BC Housing. And he goes, well, you have to go on a waiting list. You need to have your building either sold, condemned, it's uninhabitable, or you're fleeing violence. There's so many topics in order to get on that list. And I said, that doesn't make any sense. That makes no sense. I mean, cannot 2 PWD move in there? Well, you can, but you would have to be in a relationship. I go, okay, but what if you're not in a relationship? What if you just know the other person, or maybe you have a neighbor who said they can't afford the high market rent, so you want to move in with your neighbor or your 2 neighbors? Same thing. Well, as long as they're basically in one dwelling, they're actually classified as in a relationship, and you're now going to get 1 check instead of 2 checks under 1 file. And I said, so you're basically saying there's no guarantee. And the individual told me that, well, why do you keep saying no guarantee, Brent? That word's not in the vocabulary. It's guidelines that you need to follow, the guidelines under BC Housing. It's a policy. So what I'm basically, the moral of the story is, I think it's the regulations that are in there that are so much red tape that's involved. Yeah. If they cut all that red tape out of there and just let people move into there and have the income based on the individual, not household. Because that's where the other problem too is, all based on household income, and it will actually hurt the person.
That's half of the problem, but the other half of the problem is that the rates need to be increased too, because this is what I always say is that the fact of the matter is that the vast majority of people on PWD here in BC, let's just focus on BC for a moment. The vast majority are paying market rents. There's only about, I always say, maybe about 12% that BC Housing is probably only providing about 12% of their housing to PWD clients. So you have 12% versus 88 to 90% are actually paying the market rents. So I mean, how is that fair? How can you say that only providing 12% of affordable housing to PWD clients is fair math? It's not. It's pink unicorn math, like I always say, right?
Well, yeah. On average, I mean, in Victoria, I'll just pick Victoria as an example because that's where I live. But on average, a 1-bedroom in Victoria right now, on an average, is about $2,100. A PWD full check is $1,483.50. I mean, you couldn't even rent a place, not even pay for your hydro or food or your amenities, anything. So we got a serious issue happening there with the housing, and a long waiting list to get into housing, into BC Housing, if that's where a person wanted to move to. For me, I think autonomy-wise, I mean, a person should be able to live in the sector of housing where they want, but have enough resources to cover their basic needs. And when those basic needs are not being met, there's a serious problem, a flaw in the system. I guess another thing I wanted to quickly mention to you, Bonita, was your thoughts about, okay, so you got all the provincial governments, well, not all of them, but there's a lot of them that have the PWD designation for persons with disabilities in their province. There's some provinces, unfortunately, that don't have that, but there's a lot that do. What is your view about a PWD, say, living in British Columbia, and they wanted to move to, I don't know, Manitoba, and not having to reapply for the status to say that they're still disabled under another province?
Yeah, well, this goes back to the constitutional right, for adequate standard of living, and then the same essential public services for all, and that doesn't exist right now. And what I'm really concerned about, well, the medicalization, the federal government continues to see this as a medicalization. They want this disability tax credit, which is a medical sign off, which is wrong. This is wrong, and it needs to end, and it needs to be adequate income for all Canadians, same level of essential public services for all Canadians, wherever they live. And it's not going to come through a disability tax credit. It's going to come through them acknowledging that province by province, if someone has access to those support systems, that they should have them wherever they want to go. Territory, province, shouldn't matter.
Now, sorry, Brent, we do want to respect your time, and we know we're getting to the close to the end here. But I did want to touch on, if you have time, the dental.
Dental, you bet.
Because I know you wanted to do that last time. We ran out of time, and like I said at the top of the show, I had just heard just yesterday that the rumor is that they're going to tie the DTC to the dental. So I wanted to see if you wanted to speak on that, or if that's accurate or not.
It is accurate, and that's the way that it's been laid out in the legislation, is that it is a disability tax credit certificate to get access to the dental. This is something Minister Qualtra and I talked about 2.5 years ago, right at the very beginning, when we were talking about the Canada Disability Benefit. I said to the minister, and the minister was on board with this, is that, it can't be the DTC as the qualifier or the CDB. And we said we're going to need to solve this before the dental rolls out, because the dental is going to, fall within the same category where you're going to need this disability tax credit. Now, this is the way that the government has decided to move forward. I think they've done this for speed more than anything else. They just feel that this is the quickest way for them to be able to roll out these. So what I would say to your listeners today, is that please go and get the disability tax credit if you can. There is funding. The federal government has put aside budgeted money for folks to be able to go and get a disability tax credit. I would encourage many folks that I talk to say, I'm not going to, I don't want to jump through those hoops. I don't want to do it. I absolutely understand that this is a burdensome process. You shouldn't have to do it at this point in time. It is the only way to get access into the Canada Disability Benefit and the dental for persons with disabilities. Now, the good news on the dental is next year it will roll out for all Canadians, so it won't be a necessity. But I do know that right now there is that barrier. It's really unfortunate, but I would encourage everyone who can to go out and get that disability tax credit.
Yeah, well, thanks on that, Bonita, for that update. Because it's so important to get the message out there to let Canadians know what's going on with that. Definitely. What was it? I had a message for you, Bonita. Will it get clawed back from BC? Sonia had a message for me to give to you. I was just like, what are you writing down here for me? Yeah. So will it get clawed off of BC?
And that's the disability benefit she's asking about?
Yeah.
So I know that when the BC minister, Sheila Malcolmson, was asked that question, she answered it in a roundabout way. But I'm quite confident that it won't get clawed back. I think that, the way that she answered it was maybe just not as direct as it could be. But I mean, we've got commitment already from Manitoba. I'm quite sure after this election in BC, we'll have this commitment from BC. They did not roll back the CERB payments in BC, the only province who didn't. So I know that the NDP government in BC understands the cost of living crisis that is happening here, and I can't see it happening, but I can tell you that on the federal level, the federal NDP will continue to fight for that. I do have a motion on the floor about clawbacks, and I am working right now on advancing another one that has to do with cohabitation and clawbacks. So we will continue to work on that.
Wonderful, wonderful on that. Just an update for you. There was a petition that I had got generated out there, Petition E-5047. It has now reached over 500 signatures.
Yeah. So we're going to have it spoken to in the House. So that's cool.
Perfect. Yeah. That's perfect. And the more times that MPs can stand up and raise this in the House, the better. It seems quite incredible that we would be in 2024 and still not have an adequate income for persons with disabilities after all of our international commitments, our national commitments. And I would say we can't let the provinces and territories off the hook. The provinces and territories need to pick it up and step up and make sure that everyone in this country that has a disability has access to an adequate income.
Yeah. That's exactly the way I look at it. I mean, there should be no less, like Jeff Leggett always says, no less than poverty level, like financial support. It should be no less than the, I always say the LICO formula is better. That's what I like. But the federal government likes to use the MBM, right? But I mean, regardless, it's like around $2,300 a month just as a base standard. I mean, that's for people who don't have any disabilities. I mean, when you have disabilities, there's all the extra
additional
support
costs,
basically above that. But at least if we get a standard floor that we can build on and tie it to inflation, the cost of living, COLA, that way we can build from that point on. But when basically governments kind of haggle back and forth, nothing gets done. There's always that excuse of the Liberal government saying, well, there's more to do. We hear you. Well, put those words into action. Let's put it into action. Let's actually make reality for a better way of life for Canadians across our country. I mean, as we get older, we get more disabilities. They don't go away. Yeah, and so we need to protect our society and provide a base floor.
Absolutely agree. And they need to get their priorities straight. A lot of subsidies are still going to oil and gas. They're investing heavily in other resource extraction right now. Meanwhile, as you've all said, like there is a state of emergency in housing in this country, right across this country. And if the government, the Liberal government can't get the foundation right, we know the Conservative government can't get the foundation right. We need to have we need to have way more pressure happening from folks like you and those petitions that you're doing to make them understand. And hopefully, I mean, obviously as an NDPer, I'd like to see the NDP in government.
We really appreciate your advocacy as well. And that's one thing I wanted to really stress as well. So, yeah. Definitely.
I really appreciate all your advocacy work that you're doing, Bonita, for standing up for Canadians with disabilities and low income people, seniors. I mean, it doesn't matter what age category it is. I mean, we all get different disabilities as we get older. And I mean, one of my fears that I heard from my neighbor this morning is what would happen in BC if they got a Conservative government. I said, don't go there. I said, don't go there because, we want a better way of life for Canadians with disabilities, and then we'll just go backwards, right? Or if we got the Liberal government in, we'd go backwards, right? I mean, we lived through that era, for people with disabilities, and I know that the NDP is fighting provincially and federally to make things better for people. So thank you, Bonita, on basically coming on today. And,
thank you for the invite again. I really enjoy the time, and I really appreciate all the work you do to reach out and to bring folks together and have these conversations.
Absolutely, and I'd love to have you on again very, very soon.
Thanks, Bonita.
Thanks, Bonita.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.